Everything old is new again. America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, bark like a dog for me.
Where's the goodies?
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
I'm Captain Christopher Pike. Up there are my commendations, my diagnosis of childhood asthma. That big red F. That was my failing grade in astrophysics at the Academy. I know this is a hard left turn. You're en route to Vulcan to pick up a new captain. I was briefed on the classified details surrounding your last one. I know he betrayed this crew. If I were you, I'd have my doubts about me as well. But I'm not him.
Neither am I, but this is Douglas Viviani from Everything Old is New Again. Sans David Cohen, who is on an away mission today, and we're dealing with the virus, and of course he's in New York City, so can't be with us today, but that's okay, because I have a special guest star that you just heard, and a co-host for the week, which is going to be exciting. Anson Mount is an actor, producer, writer. He's perhaps best known for portraying the protagonist, Cullen Bohannon, in the AMC Western drama Hell on Wheels, for which he's also served as a producer. He appeared in the television show Inhumans as Black Bolt. Comic book fans will recognize that. And most recently was lauded for his portrayal of the Star Trek character Captain Pike, which you just heard in the second season of Star Trek Discovery. I know he's going to be too modest, but I will say that he saved that show. We'll talk about that a little bit. He's also appeared in such films as City by the Sea, Non-Stop, Safe, Mr. Right, Crossroads, Pool Hole Junkies. There's a lot here. There's Tully, Hick, Cook County, which he also produced. On stage, he's worked with the Classic Stage Company, with Manhattan Theater Club, with the New Group, the Public Theater, and Singapore Repertory Center. Let's see, Anson has also published, this is interesting, nonfiction pieces in the Daily Beast, Cowboys and Indians magazine, and Mosaic, and is currently co-authoring a 3-book fiction series with political strategist and author Stuart Stevens. We'll get into some or all of that. We're going to try. We've got limited time here, but there's so much to talk about with this well-rounded individual. He hosts a podcast centering on creative inspiration called The Well Pod, WELLPOD, thewellpod.com. And we really want to talk about that because it's very interesting. Anson Mount, thank you and welcome to Everything Old is New Again.
Well, thank you, Douglas. That was a heck of an introduction.
I know. Unfortunately, we only have a minute and a half left to the show. No, I'm kidding. But I wanted to sort of include all of that because people, at least listeners to this show, know you from Hell on, I think would say, know you mostly, let's say, from Hell on Wheels and from Star Trek. But you've done so much more and you're very well-rounded, so I wanted to include all of that in the introduction. And along those lines, it may have come from, and we'll explore this a little bit here, your mom and dad situation. Your mom was a professional golfer, which is so interesting, and your dad was a soldier serving in the Navy in World War II. And then he became, in the 60s, an editor for Playboy. Now, I'm not going to say I'm a big Playboy fan, but I'm a big Gene Shepard fan as well. So we're going to try to tie this in a little bit. I don't know if it works, but again, your dad was in an issue. He's done a number. He did many, you know better than I do, but edited many episodes or issues, I should say, of Playboy. But in 65 in September, I saw, and I did a little research, there was a pigskin review by Playboy Sports article about written by your dad that he went ahead and kind of gave the preview for the season for football that year. And the following, in October 65, Gene Shepard, one of our favorites here, also authored quite a number of articles, but that particular day did his story about the Gravy Boat riot. So my first question is, did your dad, in his experience as an editor and writer for Playboy, ever bring that home to you? I know you were young at the time, but ever bring that home to you and help you understand and look to creativity in the way that he was being creative in his world?
Well, that's a That's a very good question. I never thought about that because my father passed away when I was still rather young. I was 13. He did, by example, show me the just sheer amount of fun that you can have writing, but more importantly, researching. Because, I like to say that I come from a long line of very successful BS artists, and my father was no exception. He was the religion editor for Playboy magazine originally, and a lot of people forget this. But at its beginning, Hugh Hefner made a very smart decision because he knew he was either going to attract a boycott or a conversation. And he decided to start a conversation. So my father, having gone to Sewanee, which is an Episcopal school, although he majored in biology, when he got out of VA hospital, Hef offered him a job to become the religion editor. And it became my father's responsibility to attract articles from people in the clergy and theologians to write about ethics in the modern day. And for a long, they actually put out an issue of the magazine without pictures for a while for the clergy. And around mid to late 60s, the conversation kind of petered out. We were entering the sexual revolution. And Hef got another idea, which was, he was not a dumb guy. He was like, we're a men's magazine. We don't have a sports article. So we might want to think about that. So who here knows anything about football? And nobody raised their hands except my father says, I watch the college games on Saturdays. And he said, that's it. We're dropping religion. You're taking sports. Go. And my father rightfully freaked out a bit, didn't know how to be a sports writer. So what he did is very smart. He sent out questionnaires to all of the sports athletic directors at all the big schools. And he said, if you fill this out for me, I'll get you a subscription. So my father ended up knowing who was going to make grades, who had disciplinary issues, who was getting injured. So my father became the best college and eventually pro sports prognosticator in the business.
Wow. Did not know that it went that far, and I think that's tremendous that we can go back and see the history. That's kind of what we do on our show here, Everything Old is New Again, is sort of go back and see where we've all come from, whether it be in entertainment or anywhere, and any field, and to see that that's sort of the foundation of where you've come from, and you've done some writing yourself. You've got this podcast on creativity, which we will talk about, but certainly there's been a bit of creativity in your in your presentation, in your career with Hell on Wheels, and that lead role that you took for 5 years for 55 episodes. That sort of, to me, showed quite a bit of range in that you started off as an angry person that wanted to get revenge, and later on became more of a business person, if you will, at the time, to try to take over and get involved with the building of the railroads and all that. So when you were involved with that series, do they take any of your input, and or do they see what you're doing on the screen and go with the story a little bit on what you're doing creatively with the character, or do you know if the writers have already planned it out ahead of time what this character's kind of arc is going to be?
That's a very good question also, because I don't think a lot of people realize how different TV is from every other medium. You're biting off by design a bigger bite than you can chew and swallow. Okay. And you can have all the plans in the world on all the dry marker boards that there are with all of the budgets drawn out, and you still won't know where the show is going to take you at the end. Right. The creators of Hell on Wheels, Joe and Tony Gayton and Jeremy Gold, all great guys, they did know that the show was going to end with the driving of the Golden Spike, that the exterior arc of the show was the completion of the Transcontinental Project. But getting there, you're kind of on a wing and a prayer, because for a lot of reasons, you don't know how big your next order is going to be. I'm talking about season order from the network. You don't know what the researchers are going to reveal. And this funny thing happens in television where after about the first season or two, most experienced TV writers will tell you that there comes a time where the actor portraying the character is as much an authority on the character as the writer.
And we're going to stop there just for a moment. I'm sorry. We're going to pick this right up in a hard break here. Sorry. With Anson Mount, everything old is new again. Come on back.
Yeah.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
I was on the other side of the bridge that day. That's all. Yeah. You want to know why we retreated? We was out of ammunition. From killing Yankees. Now, don't get me wrong, they were some brave men. Brave men. But General McClellan might just as well have been sending them up against a firing squad.
There we go, back here on Everything Old is New Again with Anson Mount, who certainly is that gentleman speaking there. If you don't recognize Hell on Wheels, if you haven't seen it, you can get it on demand on AMC. Tremendous show. Cullen Bohannon was the character. And we were just talking a little bit about how that character developed, and I had to rudely interrupt Anson. So, Anson, if you don't mind coming right back on into picking up the thread, if you could, on basically how that character developed over time.
Yeah, and I was just saying, if you have good writers, which we were blessed to have across the board, they will initiate a conversation about where they want to go with the character, or there are daily conversations. There was at one point where, just because of restaffing situations, there was a season or two there where I was the only Southerner in leadership. And so a lot of the colloquialisms and the shaping of sentences and even the sense of humor was there. They came to me quite a bit for things like that. But the growth of the character was really, it was set in the cards at the beginning because, as I said, the exterior arc of the show is the Transcontinental Railroad. The internal arc of the show is the repairing of a man, or the finishing of a man. I always say, if you look at the railroad from an airplane in these days, it looks strangely like a suture. And that was sort of our central goal. Everybody was on that train, so to speak. And so we did know how we wanted to. We knew where we wanted to go. We just didn't know how to get there. And after about the second season, the job got really hard. Being the lead of a show is really long hours with a lot of material you're shooting, sometimes with not a lot of time. And there would be days I'd show up and would not have done my homework, which is not like me usually at all. And I was surprised to find that my work overall kind of flourished. Now that is not advice to young actors to not do your homework. I'm just making a point about how the character can start to live in its own boots after a while.
Right, and what we're saying also is that you became the expert of the character, of course, and you're in those shoes every day. And then even if you're not prepared, we're saying your instincts about who that character was and how they're going to react to these words and situations must have just come out as sort of an instinct, is I guess what you're saying creatively.
Yeah. But that doesn't deny the importance of a healthy conversation with your showrunner. And I had very good showrunners the entire time, including the last 3 seasons with a gentleman named John Worth, who I'm trying to collaborate with on something new now. And he's become one of my best friends in the business and in general. He came to my wedding, gave me a ukulele. Good times were had by.
Do you play the ukulele is the other question. I mean, that's an easy gift, but it's a gift with a tail on it, you know. You've got to go ahead and then start learning it.
Yeah,
It's like giving someone a puppy, right? Let's go on if I can, because we're limited on time, unfortunately. But you've been known for that character. You've been known for other things. Let's take a look, a smidge about Star Trek. You're one of the few that, and we're big fans of Star Trek here and of all incarnations, but you're one of the few that I've heard that have been a mainstay or a starring role in Star Trek and actually said and admitted before they did so that they were, in fact, a fan of the original. There's nothing wrong with that, I'll tell you. That warms our heart, and I think it shows in the way you presented this character. But before we get to that, I want to pick up a little bit here on one of, I think, your favorite episodes of the original Star Trek. Let's just hear a clip real quick, and we'll get right back to it.
It is obvious to the most simple-minded that Lokai is of an inferior breed.
The obvious visual evidence, Commissioner, is that he is of the same breed as yourself.
Are you blind, Commander Spock? Oh, look at me. Look at me.
You're black on one side and white on the other.
I am black on the right side.
I fail to see the significant difference.
Lokai is white on the right side. All of his people are white on the right side.
Now, we're fans of the original show. It goes back a long way. But he explains, unfortunately, not a ton of time, but a little bit about how that speaks to you.
I love that episode. Gene Roddenberry was so brilliant in, first of all, his choice of science fiction as a platform to discuss real issues. But he was really smart at the big idea of the week, you know, and how to give us some perspective on where we are now. And that particular episode, the title of which escapes me right now.
Let that be your last battlefield.
Thank you. That just points out the stupidity of racial division, you know, and how flimsy of a substance it is built upon. I really love that episode, and it was so well played by those guest stars too.
Yes, and I do want to talk about the creativity behind Gorshin, and also behind a little bit of the next episode I want to play for you for a moment, and then I want to tie that into your podcast because you do talk about creativity there, and I want to get a little bit about that. But by the way, the podcast is thewellpod.com. Let's take a listen for a smidge here of The Inner Light, and then we can expand on that.
That's what this launching is. A probe that finds me in the future.
Yes, my love. The rest of us have been gone 1,000 years. If you remember what we were and how we lived, then we'll have found life again.
Now, if you're a fan of Star Trek or not, you got to tune into that one as well as what we just heard as The Last Battlefield, because it does also tap into what I find both of these are the real beautiful science fiction stories, in that they show the human condition in some other environment, and it expands your imagination to see what life can be in other, if you or in another situation, and how to be empathetic for other people. And I know that's your favorite. I say this because I've seen prior interviews. I don't want to pretend that I know you as an individual. That's not fair. But I've cheated a little bit and seen that I think that's your favorite Star Trek of all time. And if I'm correct about that, maybe you could expand a little bit about that.
It's definitely my favorite of The Next Generation. It might be my favorite of all time. It's just such a standalone episode. It comes completely out of left field in the middle of that season, and it is unfortunately without most of the cast.
Right.
But that episode, man, it's almost like an episode of The Twilight Zone, like one of the better, more feel good episodes of The Twilight Zone. And I think that Patrick Stewart, he in 1 hour you see him deliver this performance of an entire person's life. You see him go through the paces of the rest of his life, or someone else's life, you find out. And then at the end, you realize he's just been, knocked out by this strange beam of energy that came on board, and he's only been out for 5 minutes. But in that 5 minutes, he lived an entire lifetime of this other species that just wanted someone to know that they had existed. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous episode. And that writer, again, whose name escapes me, just passed away, I think, this last year.
it really speaks to also the human condition, where he's lived that whole life, and then he's got to go back to an original life that he's sort of discombobulated, but then he carries forward this flute and plays some music from his prior life, if you will.
It's a beautiful ending.
It really is terrific, and that's what I want to tie in a little bit, because there's a bit of course creativity, creating the characters, creativity in acting and performing that, because it could, as we all have learned, acting, different actors could have played that role different ways, and maybe it wouldn't have worked as well, or we'll see just in a different memory. But when you deal with people on the wellpod.com, where you speak to other actors like Doug Jones and Ethan Peck, who played Star Trek, and played in the Discovery Spock, but you also speak with people like Dr. Vakish, who, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, did a episode with you, The Risk of Imagination, about Are We Alone in the Universe? So there's a lot going on in this. Just give us a tidbit. I only have a minute and a half, and we will expand more, but give us a little tidbit about what you're doing on thewellpod.com.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I should say that that name is actually an abbreviation of our actual name, which is the Well Podcast. And if you're trying to find it, you can either go to thewellpod.com, all our links are there, or if you're searching on iTunes, just search my name and you'll find it. But it's not about the person we're interviewing or the thing that they've made. It's about their relationship to creativity and how creativity fuels everything in human experience, from uncovering the secret ecosystem surrounding an individual tree to the key to coaching a championship college football team to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So we come at it from as many angles as we possibly can, but it's really about our interviewees' relationship to thinking outside the box.
Right. So, and I'm running on short, so I just want to summarize. So, for example, if someone has a book, you're not just talking, which we do here too as well. I really relate to this podcast, and I've really enjoyed it, because you don't just talk about the book per se and what's in the book, but why'd you write it? Where'd it come from? What's your background?
How do you get your butt in the seat?
Right, to actually do
3 hours a day in order to make a book.
Exactly. And that's sort of, we're going to continue with, fair enough to say, Captain Pike. We'll lead into that a little bit on the second or third section here, Everything Old is New Again, and continue talking with Anson Mount and creativity and how he really perfected that role in my world. Anyway, we'll be back right after this, and Everything Old is New Again.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything Old is New Again, with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Chris, you set standards for yourself no one could meet. You treat everyone on board like a human being except yourself. And now you're tired and you...
You bet I'm tired. I'm tired of being responsible for 203 lives, and I'm tired of deciding which mission is too risky and which isn't, and who's going on the landing party and who doesn't, and who lives and who dies. Oh, I've had it, Phil.
Welcome to Everything Old is New Again. We've not had it with Anson Mount, who is the current Captain Pike. That was Jeffrey Hunter, if you may remember him from King of Kings in 1961. He did the pilot in 65, believe it or not, for Star Trek. He was to be the first captain, and for one reason or another, it didn't work out for him. But that character lives to this day. And I'd like to then turn the tables here a little bit. And again, Anson Mount portrayed this character on Star Trek Discovery in Season 2. What I'd like to do is take a look at this and have this unique opportunity we have here to take a look into the mind of a skilled actor and our playing field to be the Star Trek character of Captain Pike, because he was portrayed 50 years ago and portrayed just a year ago. So he's still alive and well. He changed, he morphed, he was in a different part in his life and in some of these incarnations. So let's dig into it a little bit. First, I just want to play a clip here just to refresh everybody's memory of two other actors who played this character. Sean Kenny, no one knows. He is the gentleman that was sitting in a chair that was made for this ill Captain Pike. And then Bruce Greenwood in Star Trek the movie. So let's just play this clip real quick and we'll get into some discussion.
I have never disobeyed your orders before, Captain. But this time, I must. I know it is treachery and it's mutiny. I must do this.
I'm Captain Christopher Pike. To whom am I speaking?
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
You've declared war against the Federation. Withdraw. I'll agree to arrange a conference with Romulan leadership at a neutral location.
I do not speak for the Empire. We stand apart.
Well, Commander, this is awkward, but back in Mojave, I learned the best way to get into a cold stream was to jump right in. I'm here at Starfleet's order to take command of the Discovery under Regulation 19, Section C.
Well, we received no notice from Starfleet.
Because I have to deliver the news myself out of a respect for what you and your crew have been through.
I see where the Federation puts its pennies.
Do not covet thy neighbor's starship, Commander. Besides, you got the new uniforms.
And lovely uniforms they are, Captain.
Very colorful.
There we go. So we just want to take a look. The original episode, eventually, of course, we heard Captain Pike at the height of his frustration originally when we opened the show here, or this section, with he was tired of being a captain. Then there was another time later in his life where he basically could not speak. Then you've got, and he was a grotesque cripple, let's say. Then the movie presentation is a captain at the height of his career. You can hear he's got confidence and courage and strength. And then Anson Mount's presentation, I would respectfully suggest, shows the humanity of this person, the respect for others, the humor that the character has. So it's a long introduction to a short question. Is how did you undertake, and what was your thought process to flesh out this character that had been portrayed before in different parts of his life and in different ways, and make it what certainly is a successful and a character that anyone that watches this series sees is a likable and a likable hero? How did you were you able to think that through and present that? Of course, you had words on a page, but how'd you do it internally? If you can tell us a little something.
Well, first of all, when they called me and asked me if I'd put myself on tape for the role, I did not know. They didn't tell me it was Captain Pike. They said this. It was a new captain named Captain Parker or something, right? And then when I did it and they called me back the next day, I said, "Okay, you got it. And by the way, it's not Captain Parker; it's Captain Pike." I said, "Oh, goodness."
Right. It's a hills battle.
I mean, I often say that I like to play T roles, right, because I just like being in a situation where I have to sort of reinvent what it is I do to get it done. But that was the first time I'd been put there
right.
by someone else. It was a process. It was clear to me the reasons behind the writers wanting to bring in Pike, and I thought it was a brilliant choice. It was clearly there to be, a much different leader than the one that they had in the first season. And honestly, I got a lot of help from Sonequa Martin Green, because there were times, playing a leader, having come from Hell on Wheels, where I was playing a leader, to playing a leader in Star Trek, there were moments I would get stuck in Bohannon mode.
Right.
And they're two very different people. And she helped point that out a couple of times and helped to keep me from making some grave errors. And honestly, it was just good writing. There wasn't a lot that I needed to discuss with anyone. It was clear what they wanted to get done. They had gotten into the writer's room early. They had a very good leader in Alex Kurtzman. So everything was pretty clean and clear when it got to me. So I really have to – I think most of the credit really belongs to the writers.
All right, and along those lines, there's a scene here I'm going to play real quick where Captain Pike is faced with seeing his own future, which is not so great, but still making a choice. Let's hear about and see about this and see where we go from here.
You are Starfleet's captain. You believe in service, sacrifice, compassion, and love. Now, I'm going to abandon the things that made me who I am because of the future. It contains an ending. I hadn't foreseen for myself.
So I think some of the writing here, you're 100% right, really made this a hero in the greatest sense of the words, someone that honored or honors the oath that he undertook, and certainly had a view of life that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one in this particular case. As an actor, how do you get into, how do you think about this the night before, weeks before? How do you emotionally get there where you're making this kind of a choice and presenting it with all of you, not just your voice, but all of your body, your eyes? It's just so affecting the way I saw that scene, and is so memorable. I'm just wondering, how do you get there as an actor?
Thank you. Well,
easy question, hard answer, right?
Yeah. First of all, it's hard. I think it's hard watching that scene from the outside. It's hard to understand how difficult it was to produce that scene, because we shot that in many pieces across a period of about 3 weeks. So, you have the primary location that is in that atrium with the crystals. Then you have the flash forward scene on the frigate, and then you have the flash forward in the corridor with Old Pike. So it really had to get on the same page with my director for that one, and just sort of see everything that was in his head, and to kind of come up with what this, especially the scene in the corridor that has no dialogue, what that's supposed to be. And the one thing I pushed for is that I said it can't just happen from one. It can't just happen from young Pike's point of view. It has to happen from both Pike's points of view. And also just that little scene shooting a week apart, because to get into Old Pike, it was a 3.5 hour process. In terms of going there emotionally, I don't, I'm really good under pressure, and at times it's easier than other times, but I have little tricks that I don't like to talk about. that do get me there, and everybody has theirs, I suppose. But more than anything, I've learned as I gotten older as an actor that the less pressure you put on yourself, the better. The more that you can trust that something's going to happen if you're easy on yourself, if you're gentle with yourself, then usually something does.
Sort of let the moment happen while it's happening, instead of thinking about it a million times, and sort of like doing a radio show in a way that I could never do the same show twice, and certainly with David Cohen is missing here today, but we feed off each other, and if we were to rehearse something too many times, and we don't rehearse at all, but plan it out too many times, it kind of takes the creativity out of it. And so I do want to then talk about creativity in the next section here, because that's all about, or that's what I should say, a better way to say it is, that's what thewellpod.com is all about. A show that you host, a podcast that you host with an associate of yours, and you do a tremendous job at it. You don't have to deal with commercials and interrupt your guest all the time. So it's a little more fun, I'm sure, that way. But long story short, we'll be back right after this, and everything old is new again with Anson Mount.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Yeah, hey, Douglas and David, I got to say, I was interviewed on NPR by Scott Simon, another hero, but you guys are my new heroes, and I easily include you into the Scott Simon milieu of brilliant guys on radio.
Oh, wow, thank you.
How about that? We're here with Everything Old is New Again. That is Peter Weller, a friend of the show, who will be upcoming again as a guest, and we play that every so often. We're showing off for Anson Mount. What'd you think of that?
I love Peter Weller.
Obviously, you've met him in the past, or no?
Yeah, great guy.
There we go.
Great.
And we have so much fun. So I will then say to you, tune into our old shows, and the audience, of course, knows everything old is new again.biz. He's been on the show about 8 times. We've talked about jazz. We've talked about classical art. We've talked about all kinds of topics with him. We call him the world's most interesting man, although our present guest is challenging him for that title at present. But anyway, go to everythingoldisnewagain.biz, and you'll see all our old shows there, or YouTube, and just put up Everything Old Is New Again radio show. You'll see all our 300 old shows there as well. Now, I want to talk about something else. We're only 1 hour a week, so there's other hours to fill in your day. And I love this podcast called thewellpod.com. I'll just spell it out because we're on the radio. THEWELLPOD.com. This is a show that our guest, Anson Mount, who you've been listening to and recognized from Hell on Wheels and from Star Trek Discovery as Captain Pike and more. I'll tell you, it's fun because this show sort of does a little bit of what we do, but amplifies it. And what I've been trying to do is get behind what's going on with the guest, why they did whatever they did, what's some motivating factors, certainly asking questions that haven't been asked before. So let me just start with that. Anson, does that make sense? Is that a fair representation from someone on the outside looking in as to the podcast itself?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I'd spent a little time on this side of the mic, you ask, I gotta say, you ask very good questions. Like, I don't think any of your questions I've necessarily heard before.
Thank you.
But you start to realize that a lot of questions get recycled over and over, and they all have to do with what it is that you're known for. And that's fine. People do want to know about that. But I just felt like the conversations could be so much more interesting if they weren't so artist-centric. And so I had this idea for a while that I wanted to do a podcast about the creative process, and not about the movie or the TV show or the song, but what went into coming up with the idea and getting it done. And I knew that I wanted it to be a kind of storytelling, each episode to be kind of a storytelling experience. And so my best friend is one of the smartest people I know. His name is Brandon Edgens. We went to college together. He's a big tech guy as well. He knows how to do everything with sound editing and film editing. And I asked him to do it with me, and he jumped on board. And it's just been a rewarding process ever since. And in fact, I usually recommend that people start listening to it from the beginning, because a part of the experience of our podcast is you get to hear us creatively figure out how to make a podcast. And I think that we try to have fun as we do it.
And it's important to see that as well, from someone that we've done this too. We don't always interview celebrities. We do other things. We do characters. We do quizzes. We do just bantering back and forth, good-natured banter, starting the arguments you love to have, and that kind of thing over here. And so I understand what you're saying, to develop, even though that you've known this gentleman for a long time, to develop a repertoire back and forth, to not be afraid to goof with him a little bit, to not be afraid to kind of, figuratively speaking, pick on him or make fun of him. That's what I do on this side a little bit. It leads to you guys have a very natural way of speaking with each other and then with the guest. So I think that that's a nice combination. And like I say, as you see it develop, you then you sort of own this podcast, because you've seen where you're coming from as a listener, if we see where you're coming from and where you are now. So you sort of kind of take some ownership as a listener in you, and are developing your skills as a listener as well, because listening is something that I think is creative, and listening to other creative people makes you want to do things yourself that you've not been doing. But it's something that in this fast-paced day in our lives, we don't do, many people don't do as much. My kids are looking at this computer screen all the time. I take it away from them and have them listen to old radio shows, or I'll have them listen to this podcast. And I think it will light the fire of creativity within people when they see that you could be more than, quote, just an actor. You're doing so much more, and with what your skill set is, and it's beautifully done. So if that makes any sense. I don't know if there's a question there, but that's.
I absolutely agree. We have a very devoted fan base. In fact, Brannon launched a GoFundMe campaign last year in order to raise funds to go do an episode about survival, and he took an island survival course in St. Thomas, and he basically walked into the woods with nothing but a knife for a week, and had a couple of survival specialists teaching him so that we could produce an episode unlike anything we've ever done before. And they came to our aid so quickly and so generously.
And once as a listener you like the hosts, then you're on board, because as at this show, you're changing topics like you just did there from that to an interview with, let's say, Alice Cooper talking about Groucho Marx, to an interview about someone talking about is there life, on other planets. Another interview about, call your dad. So there's so many of these great topics that if you like the people, you will stick around, because you're not just hearing one topic, one podcast about the same thing every week, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you listen. So you listened to that episode with Alice Cooper?
Yes.
Yeah. So that surprised. I ran into Alice at an event, and my partner here told me, he was a professional golfer or something like that. And I said, wait, what? Because my mother is a former professional golfer, so we got to talk. He never went professional. He came close. Because after he gave up drinking, he said he needed a new addiction. And somebody put a golf club in his hands, and there was no turning back. He literally almost went pro. Very good golfer, very devoted golfer, and astoundingly charming man.
Right.
In a lot of our interview, the second part of our interview actually became about his surprising friendship with Groucho Marx. He and Groucho Marx were best friends towards the end of Groucho's life, and it's a very sweet story.
Right, and that's not something you're going to get when you watch, not to put these late night shows down. They have their thing and they have a small period of time. But when if you were to see Alice Cooper on Kimmel or what have you, you're going to hear the typical, as we talked about before, the same story, the same thing he's pushing, and that's fine. But when you get an opportunity like this show with us, with you and your podcast, to spend the hour, and you do this podcast, it looks like it's pretty much once a week for an hour, and you have the time without a commercial break to get involved and get behind the person, and again figure out what's making them creative and what inspired them, and all of a sudden you get the story of Groucho and how that inspired Alice Cooper. It's great original listen to talk conversation that you don't hear everywhere.
Well, normally, we're producing in seasons about 20 to 25 episodes per season, because it would surprise most people if they knew the amount of work that went into post-production on these episodes. Because, as I said, we're trying to tell a story, and that does take an enormous amount of editing and fine-tuning. Right now, though, what we've been doing is a new segment called "What Are You Doing?" because that's how we pronounce it in the South. And what we're doing is we're calling around thinkers, creators, journalists, artists, scientists, to ask them what they're thinking about and working on while we're under lockdown. And it's a bit more relaxed, but it's a conversation where we're trying to come at what the new normal is going to be from a variety of angles. I had a two-parter with Brad Paisley recently, and we've got a two-parter with journalist Jack Hitt coming out next week.
And that's going to be found at thewellpod.com, thewellpod.com. You can go to our website. As your listeners of our show know, it's everythingoldisnewagain.biz. We will list that as well on the website, but thewellpod.com. You have celebrity guests, you have guests that write books, and you have also, guests that you may not know as you're talking about, and they're all as interesting as the next. It's a great listen, so feel free to do that. Anson Mount, thank you so much for spending so much time with us on Everything Old is New Again. We really enjoyed the time, and we throw it out there. If you feel you'd like to come back at any time, the door is open, and we're looking forward to your next incarnation.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that very much. It was a great interview. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's great to talk to someone that has some great substance behind what you're doing. Thank you again, and we'll be back next week to talk all things entertainment, pop culture on Everything Old is New Again. These days, the news is full of teen suicide, drug and alcohol abuse. It's depressing and concerning, but there is hope. Former WWE Intercontinental Champion Mark Marrow.
Champion Choice is a live presentation that empowers students to make positive choices and live their best lives. Teach students how to live a drug-free life, prevent bullying, avoid peer pressure, and keep negative people out of their life. We are defined by our choices. There is hope.
To schedule a Champion of Choices presentation for your school or organization, visit thinkpos.org. You've been listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's pop culture entertainment talk show. Find us on the web at everythingoldisnewagain.biz. That's .biz.
See you next week. Same bat time, same bat station.